Hello guys and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I reached 300 subscribers today, so that is super exciting. Thank you all for coming, and for all you new subscribers, for you old subscribers who keep watching. It means so much to me that you guys are watching, and even when you talk to me in person, that means a lot. And I started this channel so that I could talk to people about books, so I just love it. Today is going to be the September reading recap. So I felt like I was in a bit of a reading slump, but looking back on the stats for last month, I actually didn't do too terribly. We'll see how it goes for October. But talking about September, I actually read 10 books total and 3,359 pages. So I felt like I did pretty well. A lot of those were books that I listened to. I only had 4 books that I read in my hand. One of them, though, was finishing up a very long book, and a couple of the other ones were really small books. So a very broad range of the kind of books that I read last month. Starting off with the first one that I finished right at the very beginning of the month was Middlemarch, and you probably saw this in a video a couple weeks ago. I did a separate video talking just about this book, so you can go check that out. I will put the link in the description and up in the little banner. This one I ended up giving 4 stars, and it took me, let's see, how long did it take me? It took me from February to September to finish it. So 7 months. It was good. It was worth it. But go check out that video to see my full review. Then the second book that I finished was Prisoner B3087 by Alan Gratz. This is a historical fiction book about concentration camps. I actually really enjoyed this. It wasn't one that I had heard of before, but my sister recommended it to me. She had been recommended it by someone else, so I thought I would give it a try because I generally like some historical fiction. And I really enjoyed this one. I felt like it did a great job of showing the horribleness of the concentration camps, but not being too depressing and graphic. So, like, The Hiding Place would be the best book out there about concentration camps, obviously, because she's a Christian. But this one I feel like is the second best one that I like. And I feel like the author just wrote it in a really great way. You connected with the characters. It was a really interesting story. Then the third book I read was The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and I gave this 2 stars. So my brother's in a short story class right now, and maybe I'll have him come on and talk about this since y'all seem to like him so much. This was a horrible story. I get it has symbolism and all that, but I'm going to try not to spoil it for you. This is a classic short story, and you get to the end and you're like, what did I just read? Because you have no idea that the ending is coming throughout the whole story. It's only 30 pages long, but I definitely don't like short stories because you get to the end and you feel like you kind of just wasted your time because there's not enough time to develop these characters, and most of them don't have good endings. Anyways, the writing was good. That would be why I gave it 2 stars. Then the next book that I read was River of the Gods by Candace Millard. I've read a few other books by her. I can't remember. Destiny of the Republic was about President Garfield, and I think I read another one maybe. But this was not her best one, and a lot of people didn't like it. But I did think it was interesting, more interesting than any other like historical nonfiction type books. This is about the discovery of the source of the Nile River in the 1800s, I think. And it really just got me interested in that whole geography and what's happening with the Egypt and all the people coming from different countries to explore. Was really interesting, but definitely you realize that there's a lot of people in history who are honored who don't really deserve to be honored because there's just a lot of evil in the world, and no one was actually that great and this amazing person while also making these amazing discoveries. And also a lot of the people who are credited with awesome discoveries aren't actually the ones who discovered it. So the story is about Burton and this other guy, and I think Burton gets all the credit for discovering the source of the Nile, but it was actually the guy who went with him who discovered it, and Burton never even took that trip to where the source was, so he shouldn't have gotten the credit, but he's remembered in history. And then he was definitely an evil guy. Oh, Speke was the other one who found the source of the Nile, but he still had his faults and he was evil too. And then one thing I didn't really like at all was Burton's wife was very obsessed with him. Like, she meets him and they don't even get married for, I don't know, like 20 years, and she literally is obsessed with him the whole time. And then she is so submissive that she covers up her husband's evil because she's trying to honor him. And so he's very interested in inappropriate things, writes all these books and goes to these clubs and everything. And she says, oh, well, he's not actually interested in it. He's just writing these books for educational purposes or historical purposes or whatever. So she's definitely one of those people who makes submission look bad to the world. But the story of Africa itself was really interesting, and I am interested to even learn more about it, and I've never really been interested in that history before, so that was cool. I gave that 3 stars. And then the next book was By Way of the Moonlight, one that I actually had in my hand. So this was at like the top of my TBR list, and I felt like I needed to read it because it just came out a couple months ago. I had pre-ordered it and got it. I even got a little note in the front from Elizabeth Musser. I'm going to do a full video on this, so you can look out for that probably next week. So I don't want to say too much about it in this video, but I did give it 4 stars. It wasn't my favorite of the Elizabeth Mussers that I've read. I think I've only read one other one, but I didn't like it as much. It has the dual timeline thing, which is not my favorite and confuses me. But basically, it's the story of a grandmother and then her granddaughter, each growing up in their adulthood and the problems that they're facing. It is really, really fascinating because it talks about the Battle of the Atlantic and how there's actually things happening in World War II literally right off the coast of Georgia and those states on the East Coast. So that was so interesting, and I love the historical aspect of it, but I will say more about that in another video. And then the next book is Intervention by Terry Blackstock. I gave this one 3 stars. So I had seen a lot of people talking about this one, but it was kind of mixed reviews, so I wasn't sure I was going to read it. I like some Terry Blackstock, but some are disappointing, so I put off reading it. But then Chantel Reads All Day had talked about it and said it was good despite there being a lot of bad decisions that the family makes in it. So I thought, you know, why not? I'll pick it up. And out of like this long list of want to read books that I have, my library app has very few that I actually want. So this one was available and I thought, let's just go for it. This is the book that I was reading if you saw my video on my issue with Christian fiction, and it kind of prompted that whole video because of some of the things I said in the beginning. But this book actually did fit some of that criteria that I presented in that video. They make a point of the fact that rehabs don't actually fix the problem. By the end of the book, they realize that the rehab never actually was going to do anything to help her, and they actually present the issue of when people go to these rehabs and they try to take out this sin, they don't call it that, but and they just fill it in with another one. So you go in to get rid of drugs and then you come out with a relationship or alcohol or whatever, and the point is proven throughout the book that that doesn't actually fix any of their issues. So I thought that was interesting. And there was a conversion story at the end. It was a little odd though, so I don't know if it was like believable, but sadly, again, my problem is that, so she gets saved at the end of the book, right? And she realizes that she's leading a wrong life. It's great and all, but there's not any biblical counsel. There's not any going to church. It just comes about through her own conviction sitting in a dumpster, which is totally plausible. But I think these Christian fiction books should have more of that church body coming around and counseling someone and encouraging them to repent and to change. And you don't see any of that even after she's saved. They still don't go to church or any other mention really of God. So that is why I only gave it 3 stars really. And there was a lot of bad stuff that did outweigh the good in this book because the mom is really a terrible mother. And a lot of the story revolves around the fact that her daughter's drug addiction is not the fault of her parenting. So they're spending a lot of time saying, no, you're a good parent. It's not your fault that your child went into this, which is true. Like, she's responsible for her own sin. But then it proves throughout the whole book that she is a terrible parent. And she even threatens her son multiple times, even though her daughter is literally on the line for murder. So it doesn't fit with the story. Like, why would you be threatening your son whenever murder is so close? It was very distasteful. Then there was quite a lot of the mention of the drugs. I feel like she could have done it in a lighter way, and if you were even tempted in any way towards drugs, I feel like this book would be too much. So anyway, I gave it 3 stars because it was an enjoyable read if you like kind of that mystery type book, but there was a lot of stuff that I would warn people away from it because of. Then Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I've read a couple of Agatha Christie's before, but I can't remember who did I see read this recently. Most recently, a lot of my friends have read it. I don't know. Maybe Chantel reads all day, read it recently. A lot of people have read it, and it was on my want to read, and I thought, why not? I'll go for one of these classic mystery books. This is Hercule Poirot, number 16, and I give this 4 stars. So I had come right off of reading Intervention, and then I went to this, and there's just no comparison between a modern book versus a classic book because the writing is so much better, the themes are so much better, and you're just fully into the book. So all murder mysteries obviously have some kind of murder in it, but Christie did a really good job of there's no gruesomeness, no graphics. It's just the murder that happened, and then they're solving it, and there's very little actual blood that you hear about in the book. Really, I love this one because Poirot is such a smart, logical person, and it's almost like a legal drama. You just are so pleased by the result, and seeing him come to this conclusion is so just cool to read and keeps you interested the whole time. Poirot is basically a detective like Sherlock Holmes. He sees every tiny little detail, puts it together, and comes up with this amazing conclusion. And literally throughout the whole book, you have no idea who did it. Honestly, I can't really remember who did it because he suspects everyone throughout the whole thing, and or kind of tries to get them to admit to the murder by pressuring them. So he gets all these different people, and you kind of think, oh wait, there's the suspect, but then they really weren't. He was just trying to force them into a confession basically. And I really just enjoyed the whole book. But the thing that was so amazing about it was an audiobook, and it was narrated by Kenneth Branagh, who played Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express, and he did a phenomenal job. The accents were so good. Even the American accents, the inflection that he gave to it was amazing, and you really didn't want to stop listening to it because he did such a good job of all the voices, all the characters. You actually felt like the personality coming through. It was amazing. I really started looking for other books that he had narrated, and I think he could have a definite career in audiobooks. Okay, moving on to the next one, A Gilded Lady by Elizabeth Camden. This is number 2 in the Hope and Glory series. The first one was The Spice King, which I did enjoy that one, and it had some cool historical aspects about when spices and first spice manufacturing in America, and when they started doing natural flavors and stuff. I thought that was really interesting, and I had seen someone give this a good review, and I thought, why not pick up the second book? So I did. I gave it 3 stars. I really loved the historical aspect of this one. It was way better than the other one. It was about the McKinley administration, and I really enjoyed that. And it had a little bit about the Roosevelts, which kind of plunged me into the study of Theodore Roosevelt, which I'll be talking about probably next month in my video a lot. So if I just considered the history in this book, I definitely would have given it 5 stars. The thing that knocked it down to 3 stars, though, is the whole Christian fiction thing, where there's so much infatuation in there. I don't understand. Maybe it's realistic, but you don't want to be reading about other people's thoughts that they're having in their mind. It's literally every time she walks into the room, whoa, she's wearing this beautiful dress. Wow, she looks so amazing. And then every time he walks in the room, it's like, oh, I can see his muscles. And it's like this very important, tense moment. And then all of a sudden, all they're thinking about is each other. And I'm just like, no, please. I don't want to read this. So it really took away from the story. And if it wasn't for that, it probably would have been a 5-star book because the history was just so fun. The characters were fun. I loved it. Then, almost done. Help, I'm Confused About Dating by Joel James. I actually do have this, a hard copy, but I loaned it to someone. I gave this one 5 stars. It was a 64-page book, and I read it in one sitting. It was very informative and very helpful just to kind of take all the books that I read about dating, which are... a lot of them are over here. So if you'd be interested in seeing all the books that I read about dating and marriage and which ones I think are best, leave a comment down below. Maybe I'll make a video about that because I feel like I've read almost every one there is. So this one was really helpful in just taking all this stuff and putting it together. So I got this free from my ACBC supervisor, and I thought, oh, I really need to read more books, so this will be an easy way to reach my goal for this year. And I would definitely introduce this to anyone who needs an intro into Christian dating or who needs a refresher on this whole topic. He focuses a lot on the friendship aspect of dating, and that there doesn't need to be this big pressure, but instead to just form this great friendship, because that's what matters in the long run. And when you're focused on that, the relationship actually can go really fast because you're just enjoying each other and you're being comfortable with each other and communicating. And I really liked the focus of this book. And he does touch a little bit on purity, and he does touch on how do I know if he's the one, which I thought were really good chapters. And then the last book I read was The Librarian's Spy by Madeline Martin. So if you were around at the beginning of the year, I read The Last Bookshop in London, which I absolutely love, and I actually don't even own a copy because I listened to it, but I have bought it for 2 other people that I know just because it was such a good book. Everything I love, like literary love in there and historical fiction, a little bit of romance, so good. So I was really excited for this one. It just came out this summer, and I started listening to it, and unfortunately I gave it 3 stars, and I've seen pretty much everyone that I follow on BookTube, Bookstagram, talk about this book and say that they were disappointed. It's really hard to get into. There's no bookishness to it, even though it's called Librarian. She's a librarian in the beginning, but literally in the first page, and then she's done. And I just could not figure out which was which person, probably because I was listening to it, but there's 2 people in there and they're very similar and they're both working for like the resistance, and you just can't really tell what is going on. And the characters were very difficult to relate to. The romance was so underdeveloped, it did not even turn out right, and it was set in France, which for some reason I have this issue with books in France. I just can't connect to them, so probably would not even recommend this one. And that is a wrap on all the books that I read during the month of September. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If this is the first video that you've watched on my channel, thank you for being here. And I would encourage you to go look at all the other ones that I've mentioned in this video. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys back next week so we can talk about By Way of the Moonlight. And in the meantime, you can follow me over on Instagram. I'll put the link in the description. Oh, and also all the books that I mentioned in this video will be in the description below. So thank you for being here, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.